Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yep.
We're excited to be here. We've had some live action basketball around the league. Every team's been in action a couple times. Actually, there's been quite a few surprises. We're not going to really be able to cover all of it because, as you may know from previous episodes, we're relatively long-winded. If we tried to cover multiple games from every team in the league, we'd be here for 6 or 7 hours, which you don't want, and neither do we. So what we've done is we've distilled it down to 5 quick tapes right off the top. We're going to kind of hammer through 5 things that we found interesting with 5 different teams. And then we're going to move into some deeper dives. We're going to talk about some of the big dogs around the league and how they've looked since they've kicked off. And I guess we'll go ahead and jump right into it with our first quick take. Ben, I know that you wanted to talk about Phoenix, so I'll kick it over to you and let you start with the Suns.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen with their new offense, they added Tyus Jones. They got a new coach and Coach Bud. And I think you've seen their offense. It just flows a lot better. You know, they're prioritizing three-pointers. They're shooting a lot more of them. The ball's moving a lot more, whipping a little bit more. But I still think they're missing something. And I think that specific something is the center position. They're running out of platoon right now with Plumlee and Nurkic, who's their starting center. And, you know, Nurkic is a decent rebounder. They're both pretty decent passers. But you can see it in games. They're just poor fits right now for what the system is trying to run. They're trying to make Nurkic into a three-point shooter. That's sort of not working. And I think that, they are going to go as far as their centers allow them. And, if there's something they can do to upgrade that position, that's going to get them, that could vault them into actual title contender status. Because right now I think that's sort of an anchor that's weighing them down.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think the thing with Nurkic, he's an incredible rebounder. He's just a big, huge bruising body in the middle. KD's still an automatic bucket, but I mean, look, they had a really good win against Dallas. I think we'll get into this a little bit later. There was an unbelievably bad shooting night from anybody that was not named Luka, Kyrie, Klay, or Lively. But the idea that we're going to see Nurkic get them through the playoffs as a stretch 5, quite honestly, is kind of laughable. I think most teams are going to be happy to help off of that. And while I still think KD and Devin Booker are just buckets, I don't know that they're going to be able to overcome the scoring avalanche that's going to happen at the other end, because one of the problems I see, particularly in a matchup against Dallas, is they just don't have the size to deal with Luka. I think Luka's averaging over 40 points a game in the last 4 games against against Phoenix. So they're gonna need more out of the center position. I agree with you completely. Speaking of centers, my quick take, and I know you're a huge Spurs fan, so I'll be brief and kick this over to you. But look, I was at a card show the other day. Me and my son love to collect sports cards. I walked in. It was after the Mavericks game. Talked to a couple of collectors who were selling stuff. Asked them about this Wemby rookie. And this dude was just totally willing to come off of it for half price. And I was like, I'm totally willing to buy it for half price. I found a few of these guys who were willing to do this, and they were all citing this Mavericks game that Wemby had the other night. I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever bumped into in my life. It's like somebody selling Apple stock because they heard the iPhone had a bug that needed to be fixed with a software update. So the question is, what's the software update? And I think it's simple. Wemby is guaranteed GOAT status. Like, not saying he's the greatest of all time. He's in the conversation as far as I'm concerned. If we fast forward to the end of his career, long as there's no injury, and long as he does one thing, get it through your head that you need to play more like Hakeem Olajuwon and not Jamal Crawford. It's Hakeem the Dream, not Shake and Bake. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in the games. He wants to be a shooting guard, and at first it was kind of funny, and he has the moves, he can do it, but you got to look at it from the perspective of the team. Where's your 7'6" center more useful? Is it 30 feet away from the rim, or is it next to the rim? And you take a look at the two games against Dallas. He shot 18 shots, 8 of them were 3-pointers. He made one of them. That may have been the worst game he's ever played, at least in the NBA. And and then against Houston, they've been an emphasis on getting the ball in the post. They made an emphasis on getting him possessions where he was going to attack. And he scored 27 points in 17 shots, and only 5 of those were 3-pointers. I think that he needs to understand that he is a center, and that's going to probably be hard for him. I think that his dream is to be sort of a 7'6" version of Kevin Durant, but they're different type of players. And I'll close on this, that there's one other thing he really needs to work on, and he really does need to learn how to roll to the rim on a pick and roll. Like they tried to couple him with Chris Paul, and he had one of them where he had the footwork perfectly. They got an alley-oop out of it. There are other times where he opens up, with wrong-footed. He gets knocked off his base. He needs to learn how to fucking roll to the rim. He's 7'6". He would be, that's the most obvious way for him to get points, and that's obviously rectifiable. But his future is going to be post-centric, with the addition, like if they push him out, like Jokic plays. You want to give him 3-pointers, he'll bomb away. But that's not the major piece of his arsenal. And I think that, we're aiming there, but he's resisting it tooth and nail right now. He really wants to be a shooting guard.
Yeah. I mean, and just to put a button on that topic, in that game against Houston, you see him drive across the court to roughly the free throw line, where he puts the brakes on real quick, like he's about to, and then he pivots like he's about to do a turnaround fadeaway jump shot, but he goes under. And the only human being in the history of anything, and the 14.5 billion years of the earth that has existed, he's the only human being who could stop just shy of the free throw line, pivot without a dribble, take a step and dunk it. He's just got to get it through his head that those assets are more valuable within proximity to the goal rather than 26 feet away from the rim shooting fadeaway 3-pointers. That's just it's not even being critical. It's being just reasonable.
I just want to drop him in 1980 and see what they would do with him.
Yeah. If I'm 6'8", if my dad would have seen me out there doing that, I'd have got slapped upside the head. So the next topic, look, going into the season, I was huge. Huge is a big word. I'll dial it back a hair. I was bullish on the Orlando Magic. I'm excited about the Orlando Magic. There's a couple of reasons why I'm excited about the Orlando Magic. For a couple of years, I've been really excited about Paulo Banchero. I like the trajectory of his. I like the way he's developing. I like his skill set as a player. He's becoming very well rounded. He's a good passer. He's becoming a good shooter. And then, of course, with his size and his strength, operating in and around the basket, he's formidable. With Franz Wagner, I really got more bullish on the Magic watching him during the Olympics this year. I liked watching him play in the FIBA style, seeing how physical and aggressive he could be, but also seeing how he's capable of taking games over. And I thought that was a really, really, really interesting dynamic as you sort of fast forward and look at what what's in store for the Magic moving forward. The thing I'll say about the Magic, though, is this. KCP's been great on defense. I think he has the best defensive field goal percentage in the league right now, which, we're talking, 2-3 games at this point, so I don't want to overstate it.
Epic sample size right there.
Yeah, but the only thing I'll say about that is, if we were saying Luka had that, then we're talking about a player who's not really known for his defense suddenly transitioning into being an elite defender. With KCP, it's not a stretch. You're who's an elite defender. Yeah. So I think that will persist. I want to see Orlando get more out of KCP on offense. I want to see him attacking the basket, attacking closeouts, and knocking down more shots from the perimeter. But I think the big thing, I think there are two really big things for the Orlando Magic. One is that right now, if you look at a side-by-side of Banchero and Wagner, Banchero's averaging 21 points on the season. Wagner's averaging 25. I'm sorry, that's not correct. Banchero's 21, Wagner's 25. Banchero's averaging 5 assists, Wagner's averaging 4. Banchero's averaging 8 rebounds, Wagner's averaging 5. It's a really potent duo. I like what I'm seeing out of both of those guys. One of them is going to have to take the reins. I really want to see one of them step forward, be more aggressive, become the sort of leader of the team, the unanimous number one option, the go-to guy, so to speak. I think that when you look at these two guys, that's going to be Banchero. And I think that the reason I'll wrap it up with this. You see Banchero have these huge games like he did in the first one. I think it was 33 points. And then you'll see him drop off and have these 16-point games. What Banchero needs to do is become more consistent and elevate his floor. Like you look at Shea tonight against Atlanta, and Dyson Daniels doing a pretty good job guarding him through the first 3 quarters, and he still has 22 points.
Yeah.
You know, like the other night I text you saying like Luka is not really Luka. He's not doing that well. And he was at like 24 in the first half, right? Like you want to see, not to that extent, but you want to see Banchero raise that floor. What are your thoughts on the Magic thus far?
Yeah, Banchero's problem is that, like, you just look at the man. He looks like a dominant NBA player, just physical wise. He's the type of player that physically dominates in any era of basketball. He has the talent to go with it. He can play in the post. He can play outside. His problem's always been efficiency. He is one of those players who can make really tough shots and knows he can make really tough shots. And as a result, his shot diet is comprised mostly of really tough shots. So he does not actively look to maximize, high efficiency shots. He's very comfortable taking tough mid-rangers, fadeaways. That's been his issue for, all around. I'm just looking at his shooting percentages. This year right now it's again 3 games, so we can basically rule out this year, but he's shooting 40.8%. His rookie year was 42.7, and his sophomore year last year was 45.5. 45.5 isn't bad, but you'd hopefully have it at least a couple percentage points higher for an all-star player. And I think right now they're he is sharing the load with Wagner. But if we're talking about of the two, if they're going to reach their potential, Banchero has to be.
I agree completely. Wagner's not capable of getting them there if he does grab the reins. It has to be Banchero.
Yeah. Wagner could be a really good number 2.
100%.
A fantastic number 2. And, but Banchero has to be the number 1. And I think that, he has all the tools available to him. And the thing I like about the Magic is that they have actually assumed an identity. They are a hard-nosed, rough-and-tumble team that likes to muck up games, why they beat the Heat. So they have all these things going for them. But, until he fixes this efficiency problem, I think that there's going to be a ceiling on how good they can get.
Yeah, maybe a little more 2-man game between him and Franz Wagner could help with that, because Franz Wagner gives you a lot of options, particularly out of like a pick and roll because of his size. But I'll kick it back to you and let you start us off on this quick take. What the hell is going on in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it last night, and one of the things that's happened is Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic have switched teams. It used to be that Luka Doncic was this one-man show who had a bunch of decent, but not like overwhelming supporting cast. So you could, couple which you could score on any given night, and no bench. And Jokic had this, murderer's row, and now it's been completely flipped.
Yeah,
and we're seeing Nikola Jokic right now have to play like Luka Doncic used to have to do. He's taking 12 3-pointers a night. He's having to score 40 points. He's having to score all the offense himself. I mean, the reality is there's 2 things. One, they've gone all in on a bunch of youngsters on the bench, and that could work. These guys have to be bled in. They have to. They're going to take time. It's going to work. But they've paired them with Russell Westbrook, which I can see in theory, like I can see like someone thinking, oh yeah, like an athletic guard who can play defense, who runs, that will go well with the guy who can throw outlet passes like Jokic. Okay, but Westbrook's is like own. Anyone who follows basketball knows that he is one of one, put it that way.
Yeah.
And his brand.
He's like a guy that's easy to hate on and love at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And so I have my doubts there. I thought I'll be the first to admit.
I think that's to put it mildly.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I thought Saric was going to do better than he has done. Now it's been 3 games, but I thought it would be great to have like a Jokic light. He hasn't qualified as, I mean, as even that so far. Like I think he's still kind of come up to speed in the system. But and then the youngsters, they're just not producing right now. There's not, so they have no bench. And but even more worrisome than that for me is the fact that both Murray and Porter Jr., who had bad playoffs pretty much last year, have come back this year in the same kind of system where they're just not they are not playing at the level they played at 2 years ago when they won the title. Neither one. They are at like 80% or 75% of what that was. And this team is not deep enough to overcome that. They can, one of them, yes. One of them I do actually believe, as long as someone else, bumps up a level, you could overcome it. But those are the two those are the two lever pieces. If they both don't work, the lever doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think that there's some serious problems brewing there. Now, do I think they're going to make the playoffs? Yes. I think some of these predictions are out
of sure. Yeah,
control.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're dealing with a situation where they lost to the freaking Clippers, and the Clippers are like they're feisty. But I mean,
they're up right now, 86-79 on Golden State. Third quarter just ended.
But I mean, Jokic scored 40 odd points, and they still lost to them. I mean, that's some flashing red lights,
Yeah. The thing with Jokic and this iteration of Denver, I think you're right in the Luka Doncic comparison. I think that's real apt because like the looks Jokic is able to create for his teammates hasn't changed. He's still getting them to open looks. The shooting isn't there. That's the problem. And so if like you just end up with all these empty possessions with bad shooting, and it just becomes incumbent upon Jokic to quit passing and go to work himself. And this past game, he was able to keep it competitive because he was shooting like crazy from 3. Now, I have as much faith in Nikola Jokic as anybody. I don't know that we can expect to see him sustain that level of 3-point shooting and keep Denver in every game. But I think you're going to see him. I think this will be, numbers wise, Nikola Jokic's most impressive year because I think what Denver's going to need from him is going to be different than what they've needed from him in the past. But I like, the winning formula with Jokic has always been averaging in the low to mid 20s as far as scoring and then keeping them assists up. And I think it's going to be him averaging in the 30s and the assists being down is what they need, at least in the immediate future. You mentioned Sarge. And this is a good transition. He hasn't looked good in Denver. And it's interesting because you look over at Memphis and Memphis, look, like, I don't know who was sitting around waiting to see if Ja Morant still had it. I was not one of those people. I fully expected Ja Morant to come out full force and look every bit of who Ja Morant is. I mean, maybe knocking a little rust off here and there, which is to be expected after such a long absence. But he has. I mean, Ja Morant is just a generational athlete. And when you put a basketball in his hand, magic happens. The more interesting thing to me, as far as the Grizzlies have been, as far as the Grizzlies go, is Jay Johnson. Because there were a lot of questions. I'm sorry, Jay Huff. I was thinking about football. Jay Huff. Because when I was actually tuning in because I wanted to see what Edey looked like. And that first night out, that was pretty rough. I mean, he even got in foul trouble that second night. But Would he foul out in 14 minutes?
I believe it was 14 minutes. Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive. So, but, Jay Huff came in and played incredible. And he sustained that level of play heading into the next game. And if I'm not mistaken, Jay Huff was on the Denver Nuggets roster last year.
He was.
He was. And
he wasn't just like a guy who was on there for like 5 games. He played 20 games for them last year.
Yeah. Like, he would be a perfect backup for Nikola Jokic, providing them with some scoring off the bench, ability to shoot and stretch the floor a little bit for a big man. And I feel like, Memphis is certainly one of these teams that's going to be fun to watch all year. Getting Jaren Jackson Jr. back, getting the whole band back together again, seeing what him and Bane and Ja look like together. Jay Huff, how he fits in. Because Jay Huff can also be one of these guys that, 5 weeks from now, you're like, hey, you remember when you dropped Jay Huff's name on our first podcast of the regular season? I hadn't heard from him in a while, have we? And so
he just got waived. Yeah.
yeah. I can easily see something like that happening, but give the man credit where it's due. He's been really good thus far, and come up with some big baskets for them. But I feel like it kind of also goes to, I'm not entirely sure what the hell Denver's front office is doing.
I don't.
Does Denver's front office know what they're doing?
Yeah, I understood the move to not re-sign KCP. I have not understood anything else outside of that situation. I think that they have come up barren, essentially, in free agency for 2 straight years, when other teams in their situations have gotten decent assets. Like Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr. should have been someone they should have picked up. And
right now watching the Clippers Golden State game, Derrick Jones Jr.
Yeah,
could you imagine the lob threat Derrick Jones Jr. is with somebody like Nikola Jokic? I can, because you saw it last year in Dallas.
Yeah, but there's other things, like they signed Russell Westbrook. Why didn't they? Dennis Smith Jr. is still out there. He's a younger, more athletic version of Russell Westbrook without the neuroticness. He's also, someone who isn't going to come in there thinking he's an all-star. Now, maybe you want, Westbrook's veteran leadership, blah, blah, blah. But, why aren't they going after players like that? That's the type of pieces you get. That's literally what Bruce Brown was.
Lonnie Walker.
Yeah, Lonnie Walker. Same example. I don't understand that. Then you compare that to Memphis. I'm just reading at their depth chart. Their starting 5 right now is Morant, Smart, Bane, Jackson, Edey. And their backups are Pippen Jr., Kennard, Williams, Aldama, Clark, and Huff. That's 11 deep of solid NBA rotation players. Their entire bench right now, I'm listing Pippen, Kennard, Williams, Aldama, Clark, and Huff. That is better than anyone on Denver's bench at this point, playing currently.
Denver's bench is
you can't have 7 players on one team's bench be better than 1 player on your bench.
You look at the plus minuses on Denver's bench for this season, it's atrocious.
And now, I have some hope for some other players on Denver, but they're not performing. And the bigger problem.
Real quick though, on the hope for the players on their bench, I don't disagree. And for example, one that pops top of mind is Peyton Watson.
Yes.
But when you have a player like Nikola Jokic at this point in his career, you're not looking to build a team around him that's going to develop into a contender. You're looking to build and maintain a contender right now, because right now is the time to maximize on his talent. You can't kick the can down the road on a guy like Nikola Jokic.
They fundamentally have bet, and they've said it publicly, that you're wrong. What they said is they could take the nucleus of that title team, which was the starting 5, and just rebuild a bench from scratch based out of young players and keep this dynasty around. That's what they said they will do. And right now they are proving us that is not possible. It is like the Golden State 2 timelines thing where they suddenly end up blowing up both timelines. It's congratulations. You did actually succeed in doing 2 timelines. You just destroyed both of them. The X-Men would be proud. But I think that the problem is, like, I'm just listing this right here. You got Saric, Watson, Strother, and what's the name? Vlatko Konkar. I actually have some hope for Strother. I have hope for Watson, but those are long-term projects. Both long-term project pieces, like 2-3 years down the road. Are so basically you're saying that you're going to go into war with your bench being Saric and Westbrook of like guaranteed like Grizzly veterans. What the fuck we doing? Like I don't want to swear too much, but like what the fuck are we doing? Like no other NBA team doing this. So this is like we're getting into like is there like ownership directives on stuff here because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, transitioning from what in the hell is that ownership or what in the hell is that front office doing to, oh my God, what has that front office built? Let's talk about Boston.
Yeah, I mean,
they seem like a halfway decent basketball team that has a potentially bright future ahead of them.
Yeah, I think that if they study hard and put in practice hours, they might be able to, get a D1 scholarship or something like that. But, we're talking about a team which, in my opinion, I'll keep on going back to this. This is a generationally good team. Now, that does not mean they're going to win the title. There's a lot of things, in the air. But we are talking about a team which is young, which has potential all-stars with Porzingis included at all 5 positions. One of the best benches in the league. And right now, their top star, Tatum, is playing as well as anyone in the NBA. I'm not saying he's the best player in the NBA. But the Tatum that has played in the first 3 games of the league has fixed his jump shot, is showing improved playmaking, is showing really good defense, and is starting to, not fully, starting to drive more than take those step back fadeaway jumpers. Like we can't ask too much, but it's no longer a 90-10 ratio of step back jumper to driving to the hoop. And Tatum is pretty much at this point, unstoppable when he puts his head down and just drives to the hole. Jaylen Brown is the best number 2 option in the league. Maybe you quibble about the Lakers, but and then White and Holiday, they're the best defensive guard duo in the NBA, arguably one of the best guard duos in the NBA, and Porzingis is arguably the most talented player on the roster overall. So like I think that we're that there's a lot of people that sort of put them down for how they played, and I think people have recognized how good they've been. I think the demolition of the Knicks, just sort of like the nature of it and this like the lethal offensive performance, especially the shooting from 3, made people recognize this fact. But what's caught my eye the most out of all this is that the ball movement and the sort of like it's reached the era, like what I call it, like the 2014 Spurs are my nirvana of basketball. Like the way they played basketball, the ball movement, they all knew exactly where people were going to be as like a telepathic connection almost, because they played together for 8-10 years to that point. So they knew exactly instinctively where everyone was going to be. And teams had a really hard time blocking them, even though they were all old, because it was like, they were like playing chess against checkers. And I'm starting to see that similar level of like, comfort, understanding of passing with the Celtics. And that's what's really exciting to me. And so, yeah, I think we're potentially gearing up for a team that could win 65 plus games, and be really, really special.
Oh, I mean, like barring injury, I think that that seems almost, if not likely, inevitable. Or if not inevitable, likely. I'll add this because the thing with Tatum, like you said, you're not saying he's the best player in the league. And I don't think he is the best player in the league. However, I think that people react to claiming that he is in a ridiculous way. Like they almost act like you've, committed some faux pas. This is sacrilege, it's blasphemy. Very, very, very small thing. Like Tatum just changes his shot diet.
Yeah.
and reduces the number of threes and becomes more aggressive off the dribble. I think Tatum's right in the conversation for best player in the league. I think that little alteration elevates his level of play into conversations with the Jokic's and the Lukas. I actually think he's a better player than Shea all around. And the thing I'll say about Boston as a team, their defense. A lot of people get mesmerized by the shot making, the number of threes they're taking, and at least 3 games in, the number of threes they're making. And for good reason. And I think there's a legitimate debate to be had about like whether or not that's a product that's exciting to watch and all of that stuff. But whether or not it's not really up for debate right now as to whether what the Boston Celtics are doing is a winning style of basketball. To me, that debate is over and done. That they've won a title and appear to be poised to do it again. So with that said, it's so overwhelming. It's like a blitzkrieg. Like you watch that New York game. It's just a barrage of threes. And I'll admit, in the New York game, like the defense from the Knicks was as bad as anything I've ever seen. I mean, they were just completely not even attempting to contest some of these shots. But when you look at the defense from the Celtics, it's always on point. I think the best backcourt in the NBA is Luka and Kyrie. But when you talk about a defensive backcourt, I don't think there's anything close to what Derek White and Drew Holiday give you. And you can throw Jaylen Brown into that as well. I think that in terms of perimeter defense from guards, they're at the top of the list. And when Porzingis is in the game, they have elite rim protection. So I think, and like all 5 can guard.
Yeah.
All 5 of them can play one-on-one defense. All 5 of them play very good team defense. And when Porzingis is out there, they communicate well and they're good at funneling. Well, first of all, they're good at cutting off driving lanes themselves. But whenever they do get beat, they're good at funneling it to the rim protection. And it's really difficult to keep pace with a team that plays defense that well and scores at the clip that they do, particularly when they're knocking down shots. I've thought through this many a times because I am naturally resistant to the idea of repeats. I want to see not just my favorite teams win, but just other teams win. But outside of injury, the only way I see Boston not repeating is just they're going to have a bad shooting series.
That is. I mean, like there were questions about, we haven't even touched on the fact of have they come back with a chip on their shoulder? And it's pretty clear that the answer is yes. And then, like, this is maybe the first case in the history of pro sports where that chip on the shoulder was actually merited. Most of the time, it's just people making shit up about that, in their own minds to amp themselves up. But they have a very fair case to be made that they felt that they got disrespected. Brown for not being on the Olympic team, Tatum for being, 11th man on the Olympic team or whatever he was. I think that there's a lot of people this offseason that discounted their title because of the sort of injury-riddled Eastern Conference playoffs that they had, which wasn't their fault. And I think that the other thing to keep in mind was you had a lot of the Celtics coming out, especially Tatum, which was like, no one will ever be able to to deny us this after they won the title. Well, people did. People still mocked them, and I think that has pissed them off. And their response has been to try to show them they're wrong. And I'm excited to see what happens. But looking at the rest of the East, buddy, right now, that looks like a complete mess. What looked like a really, really strong conference beginning of the season. Indiana, They've been bad. I mean, I don't know what your feeling is, but they've looked pretty bad to begin the year. Their offense is just out of sorts. They lost to New York 2 nights ago. I believe they lost tonight. The Sixers have already have everyone injured. What are your thoughts about those two teams?
I don't think anything of Indiana. I think that like we're 35 games in and we're still talking about that. Then that's an issue to me. But 2-3 games in, I'm not going to make much fuss about that. Philly, I think, is a real problem because, it seems less than ideal when the NBA opens an official investigation into whether or not you're just sort of stashing your MVP center because you don't feel like you can get him to the finish line unless you do. And
the center gives an interview saying he will not play back-to-backs.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to play back-to-backs. And then, like, the guy you brought in who was supposed to be the other elite scorer that was a stopgap for when Embiid wasn't available, that was kind of supposed to keep the trains running, he's out, for an extended period of time due to a knee injury. So that seems less than ideal. But like, as far as Indiana goes, I kind of give them the same grace period I did New York after the Boston game. Like, I don't think that if you got a Boston Knicks series in the playoffs, it's going to look anything like what it looked like the other night.
Every game, you don't think that's what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I give a little bit more grace to the Knicks than I do to the Pacers because the Knicks had so many moving parts right before the season opened. And that's fine. Like, it's not just Cat coming in; it's also guys going out.
Yes.
And everybody having to get used to them not being there in very different playing styles. So, like, and with the Knicks, I'd also say, like, one thing you can really take solace in. Like, I don't know who the people were who were like, Cat's not going to fit in New York. I think that's great. I mean, I know who they are, but like, I think that Cat is going to be good in New York. So, like, I'm not like, to me, that wasn't a shock to see him, play well. Even in the Boston game, he was kind of having a hard time figuring out where he fit in on the court, which seemed understandable to me, given his late arrival. But like, eventually he was just like, to hell with all this, and just started playing his game, kind of like as a standalone piece. And you saw that work. And then in the second game, he really bounced back and looked great. But if I'm the Knicks, I'm taking a lot of
He's
consolation in these early games from how well McBride's played.
been fantastic.
Miles McBride's
playing at starting point guard level.
Yeah. McBride has been just top tier. Like, and I think that's part of the reason why they maybe weren't so reluctant to let go of Dante DiVincenzo, was they knew what they had sitting on the bench in him. So I think that the Knicks are going to be good.
One last point on the Knicks. I've thought Bridges, like, his shot, has that hitch. Everyone's talked about that. We don't need to go into it. But what impressed me the most about the game against Indiana, he can create his own shot. He can score, he can score at 3 levels. He can score at the rim. He can score at mid-range in a way DiVincenzo and other players really can't. And
you saw against the Indiana series, whatever was going on with this shot, I actually think you saw it in the second half, not the Indiana series, the Indiana game. I actually think you saw it in the second half of the New York Boston game.
Yeah.
It was like, I remember Reggie Miller was like, well, Miles McBride's been working. I'm sorry, not Miles McBride. Mikal Bridges has been working to get rid of the hitch in his shot. It's been off. And then he comes out there and you see him. It was like he put the hitch back in his shot in the second half. And he started knocking them down. Like, look, I don't give a damn if you have a hitch in your shot if you're making them. I'm not going to say there's not like instances in which there's increased efficiency from reducing the hitch, but you have
the ball into the hoop. As long as you make it, do whatever you want.
Yeah, 100%. And he was watching that shot in pregame warmups before that Boston game. I was like, what in the hell is this shit? This is about as ugly a shot as I've ever seen. But like, it seems that that's kind of working itself out. I'm not too worried about that. I mean, the people who are looking, or like, like I said, I'm as quick as anyone to try to look for the crack in the armor, the crack in Boston's armor for why they're not going to repeat. It's just like, I mean, you just have to admit you're reaching. Like you have to emphasize the word if, like if they have a bad shooting night, in a series, yeah, they're vulnerable. You know,
And everyone else has questions too. I mean, you got Milwaukee. I know they're missing Middleton. I mean, they just lost tonight to Brooklyn. They just lost to Brooklyn, guys.
that's not a good sign.
That's not good. That's just really not good. You know, and they lost the Bulls right before that. Like this is kind of feels like the Bucks of last year. Now, I will say they look more athletic.
And Dame and Giannis have been playing better together.
But
that's actually kind of like more proof against them. It's like if Dame and Giannis are playing well together, you expect them to succeed.
This kind of feels like a team that maybe just passed its hour. And you know, but like, you know, we'll give them until they get Milton back, obviously.
Sure. But I mean, I'll give them more than 3 games in general, even without getting Middleton back. Yeah.
And then, you know, Cleveland has clubbed to death a couple of baby seals in the beginning of the season. But, you know, like I think that the teams they've beaten, they're 3-0, to be fair to them. But the teams they've beaten have a combined record of 1-7. You know, so I'm not going to read too much into it. You know, I think for them, it's been covered elsewhere, but the big thing is going to be they need to play. They really want to play. I don't say they need to play, but they really want to play their 2 big lineup. That seems to be something that they're eternally, you know, convinced of and they're committed to. Otherwise, they've had multiple opportunities to trade away at least Allen. And the only way that makes any logical sense on offense is for Mobley to suddenly become a 40% three-point shooter and for that to be his role in offense. He just sort of stands in the corner and bombs away. And, you know, he's shown a little bit. I mean, he had a couple of games. He had 2 games this year. At the beginning of the year, he's played 3 games. Again, he's had 2 games where he shot, you know, I think he made like 2 of 3 in both games. And then he had 1 game where he didn't make any threes. But he's shooting 3 threes a game, guys. Like, he's not, like, we're not seeing high volume. I'm not convinced that's going to happen. I still think that this is a flawed experiment with they have the pieces to build a really, really lethal team. They just need to make some trades. That's just that I'm just, you know, I'm convinced of that. And then, you know, finally, I also think they still have some bench questions they have not addressed. But, you know, props to them again. They are 3-0. I just want to point that out. I don't want to make the Cleveland fans mad and say that we're not, you know, not talking about them, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, I said earlier in the podcast during the quick take segment that I was bullish on Orlando. That hasn't changed. I still think Orlando is a team that could be like I think they could very easily be a team that when the postseason kicks off, you're not wanting to draw them as a first round series. And so I think that with players like Ben Caro and Franz Wagner, they're capable of getting into and also in the playoffs, players like Jalen Suggs punch way above their weight.
Yes.
Like they muck the game up. They create a bunch of turnovers. They make a lot of hustle plays. They fight for a lot of extra possessions off the glass. So I think players like Jalen Suggs can never be underestimated in the playoffs. I really like Jalen Suggs. I like that they re-signed him. So I'll throw their name in the hat. I mean, like talking about the other teams in the East that, you know, you see as potential threats to Boston, though. Like if you frame like if the conversation's 30,000-foot view, who do I think is going to be interesting to watch in the playoffs? Then yes, Cleveland and Orlando and Indiana and all these teams can be in that. There's only 2 teams in the East that I think have parts in the building that make it interesting against Boston. And the reason I think that is because you get into a series against Boston, and you saw this last year in the finals against Dallas. Like if all of your offensive firepower is coming from your backcourt, like you can have who I believe is the best point guard in the world. I would argue the best basketball player in the world, and Luka Doncic, and he'll get his. And then you can have a guy of Kyrie Irving's caliber, and by that I mean just, all-time great level, not like greatest of all time type, but I'm talking about like an all-time great level player. Like he's a player that when I'm talking to my grandkids, I will remember him, and I'll be like, "Oh, you think this guy's got a handle? You should have seen Kyrie Irving. Y'all don't even play basketball for real anymore." Like, And so like
the old fogies, Pete Maravich, basically.
Yeah, 100%. But like you're looking at when you look at that matchup with Boston, I mean, like their strengths defensively are with Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Jaylen Brown. That's where their strength lies, and so attacking them from that point isn't what's going to do it. What's going to do it against Boston, potentially do it, and so like it's the if thing again, because the chinks in Boston's armor is not evident at all. But I think what it is you're going to need a big like Giannis or Embiid who are capable of going down the court and consistently getting you buckets and keeping you in that game. And I think that like that's where you could potentially find a weakness for Boston, is they just don't have anybody who can match up like you need to on those two guys.
Yeah. And right now, the Bucks look like a mess.
Yeah.
And Embiid is hurt. Well, actually, we don't even know he's hurt because they haven't said anything. They're just not playing it. So, yeah. That's kind of the state. But, I'll say it right now. If you gave me Boston or the field to get to the finals right now, Eastern Conference side, I'm taking Boston.
Oh, 100%. Like, especially if you give me a waiver on injuries, like if there's major injuries, I get out of the bet. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like there's no one in the East. I mean, every preseason, and I'll go ahead and say that we're going to do it again after the trade deadline. But before the season starts, we all talk about how good Miami is going to be, like how dangerous they are. You can't really overlook them. You can't underestimate Miami. Those expectations of Miami are currently in the process of their annual process of early season disappointment.
Yeah.
And then we will forget about them. And then the trade deadline will come around. Miami will be in rumors demanding that you send a All-NBA first-team player to Miami for 2 fourth-round draft picks in the year 2048. And those trades will not materialize. Big shocker. And Miami will carry they'll carry the same team they've got already forward. Jimmy Butler will make some comment if he's not actually moved out of Miami, which I think there could be a possibility of that this year. But he'll make some comment if he's not, about how Miami's about to buckle down and make a run, and you'll see like we're a different animal whenever basketball really gets down to heat culture. And then they're going to disappoint us for the second time this season at that point. So I don't really see a whole lot of competition in the East. I feel like the East without Embiid healthy, and because the piece about it that it's easy to say Embiid's back, Philly wins. Embiid has to be back in time to build chemistry with all the new pieces on that team. That's a big piece of it. And the team also has to build chemistry with Paul George. And even if Embiid does come back, you still have injury questions about Paul George moving forward. He's not been a clean bill of health in recent years either. So I'm less than bullish on the field. Let me put it that way. I have full faith and confidence that Boston is going to remain the cream of the crop in the East, and that they can go ahead. Boston fans can go ahead and start booking, go ahead and slotting in some vacation time and booking hotels for the finals. Well, they can't do that because they don't know where the hell they're going to play yet. But they can go ahead and do the vacation time. So moving on from the East, Another team of interest that I know you wanted to talk about was in action tonight. It was the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say we were like hard on them. We were still predicting that they would, finish top 4 in the West, both for our cases. But we were a lot harder on the Thunder this, in the offseason than, some of our, the media peers who were already declaring them to be the greatest team in NBA history. And we're 3 games in, so I don't want to get too far ahead. But I do think that there's one thing that, we hadn't taken into account when we were talking this offseason that has seemed to have happened. Is, we both talked about, and I specifically mentioned how one of the things that I saw as a problem for the Thunder going forward was that I didn't think Chet Holmgren, because of his size and specifically his weight, was going to be able to be a center, a 5 full time in the NBA. I thought his future was at a 4. And Holmgren, in the first 3 games of this season, because the Thunder have lost all their other centers and have had to sign a former bartender to be his backup, that's a true story, by the way, guys. They signed a guy who was a former bartender to be his backup, but has performed. He's been lights out. And, he's, averaging over 23, 24 a game, but he's had multiple games in a row now with like 15 rebounds close or so forth. He was absolutely dominant defensively against the Nuggets, like absolutely dominant.
He's averaging 24 points a game. He's leading the NBA in rebounding with 13 rebounds a game. So you've got a guy who's averaging 24 and 13. And I think this is the kicker. He's currently leading the NBA in blocks, averaging 4 blocks per game.
Yeah. So he's the best. Yeah. So the first 3 games, he's the best big in the league. I'm not saying he is the best big in the league. Let's be very clear. But he's been fantastic. And what
I will say he is not. I don't even think he's been the best big in the league through the first 3 games. I think that goes to Anthony Davis.
We have a Lakers section at the end of this, but but I agree with you actually about that. Davis has been better, but the thing that's been most impressive to me about him, he's stronger. He is visibly stronger than last year. He was able to hold up against Jokic. Jokic could shove him a little bit, but he could still stay in the play. He blocked his shot a couple of times. This is a big development for the Thunder. Now we'll see how it goes the rest of the year. This is a long-term thing. Other players may be able to adapt to it. He still looks real thin, just to be honest. Like he doesn't look visibly bigger than he did last year. But this is a big improvement for them.
Let me say, I want to chime in on the Chet thing. I think Chet versus Jokic. That's the part I want to chime in on, because I think Chet is a really good power forward.
Yeah.
I don't think Chet is a great center, and I don't think the Denver game is a good estimation of how good Chet is as a big. That what OKC did in that game, which I'll give full credit to Mark Daigneault for, it was very smart, is to say this team can't shoot. So we're going to leave all them guys wide open on the perimeter, and we're going to swarm Nikola Jokic like wild hornets and effectively turned Chet Holmgren into a help side defender on Jokic. With Jokic having to deal with, smaller players swiping at the ball, forcing him to get high where Chet Holmgren was waiting on him. Now I think Chet, and my real reason for saying that is if you're in a game with a previous iteration of Denver where you do have to worry about the shooting on the outside, and you can't afford, particularly with a player like Jokic, because if you remember in that Denver OKC game, this was not happening early in the game.
No, it was not.
It was not happening early in the game. It was only after OKC realized we're able to leave these guys open on the perimeter. That's where the problems really started. But if you're in a matchup with Chet versus Jokic, where they're forced to maintain some level of defensive integrity to honor the shooting of Denver, and Jokic is one-on-one with Holmgren. Holmgren, I agree with you. He's stronger. He ain't anywhere near strong enough to deal with that. Like Jokic is going to give him way, 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 way too much. I think that the problem for Denver, even if they did figure out a way to work out that shooting, is that theoretically in a playoff matchup, it's going to be Isaiah Hartenstein as the primary matchup on Nikola Jokic, with Chet still coming as a help side defender.
Yeah.
So and that's when you've got to start seeing how the Aaron Gordon coming behind Chet plays out. But I think Chet Holmgren has been he has exceeded my expectations. If you'd asked me what I thought he was going to average per game this year, I'd have put him somewhere in the 18 to 20 points per game range. He seems like he's going to take a step and bump that up. And I'll offer this and the rebounding. I think that has always been in Chet. I think that them having to move him more underneath the basket with Hartenstein hurt has just increased his rebounding numbers. Now, some of that is maybe he's a little stronger, he's a little more experienced, he's just better at it now. But I think him moving under the basket just his position on the court has increased his rebounding numbers. But we're going to find out what peak Chet Holmgren looks like this week. Because when Chet Holmgren and Wemby, I told this to my brother-in-law last night who lives in San Antonio. I was talking about buying those cards. He was like, I hope you know what you're doing. That's a lot of money to spend on cards. And I said, yeah, man, if there's a sure bet in basketball right now, it's that Wemby's going to be good. And I said, but you'll find out what peak Wemby looks like, because he's one of those. He's one of them ones that were kind of nervous after seeing the Wemby Mavs game, and I was like, man,
that was so bad. It was so bad in that game.
Yeah, but anybody who's played basketball before knows, it's just not that's not going to in any way foretell what Wemby's future looks like. Look, my point with Wemby and Chet is this. The barometer that you want of those two guys, if you really want to figure out where they're at this stage in this career, you're going to find out this week when they match up against one another, because they appear to hate one another. And when they play against one another, they give each other their best, because each of them wants to prove that they're the best player in Chet's adopted rookie class.
Yes. They both pretend like they don't actually hate each other, but then they go out there and go one-on-one all the time.
Yeah.
It's very fun to me. It's
yeah, they're both playing right up to the line of flagrant ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the entire game.
He's the only guy Wemby's tried to literally go right through the chest of in the NBA. So
yeah. There's I don't care what they say. That's one of those things. It's like when Dante DiVincenzo was like, "Oh, we were just completely joking." It's like, sure you were, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, there were no hard feelings after the trade. But I think Wemby and Chet have a competitive rivalry that's good for the game. And one thing I think you can take from it, that it is clear Chet is taking a step.
Yes.
That is clear. I'm not taking anything away from Chet. I feel like his ability to play the 5 for 82 games and carry them through the playoffs at that position will be limited. And I also think one of the question marks for OKC moving forward is going to be, and you saw this a little bit tonight with Atlanta, but there's another facet of it people aren't really talking about. When you look at the Dallas series last year, it forced Chet to, because of Lively's presence in the middle or Gafford's presence in the middle and them trying to pull them away from the basket, it forced Chet to basically become a spot-up shooter, right? And the way Dallas handled that was, instead of putting Lively on Chet, they put him on Josh Giddey and then let him help off of Giddey at the rim. And then they put someone who they felt would do better at contesting Chet's dribble in PJ Washington on Chet. And then I think to a certain extent, his ability to shoot over PJ also baits him into taking that shot more often, which favors Dallas. My question for OKC is going to be twofold. When Isaiah Hartenstein comes back, the only way to get him on the floor is to push Chet more out towards the perimeter and get him out from underneath the rim. And I think like seeing what Chet looks like out there kind of forces the catch-22 of Chet. Like if Chet can take that leap from that position and then play like what I think he imagines himself to be, which is kind of really a Kevin Durant. If he can, he's certainly not going to play at Kevin Durant's level. I'm not saying that, but like if he's able to play as a stretch four, who can consistently knock down 3-pointers and not just wide open ones, but also contested ones, and then take people off the dribble from the perimeter and score at the basket, then OKC really does have something with Hartenstein on the floor. If they don't, then I think that's a bit of a conundrum for them to figure out. You know, when you see Chet's level of play diminish by moving him into that role to make space for Hartenstein. And then the other aspect of the Hartenstein thing I still need to see figured out. And quite frankly, even without Hartenstein, because I think you saw this a little bit tonight in the Atlanta game in the first half and in the third quarter with Dyson Daniels, who's a good, long, strong perimeter defender guarding Shea. Just his ability to reduce Shea's efficiency some and create a lot of empty possessions through three quarters, and then force the ball into other people's hands. Like, you don't have a natural playmaker on that team. So what you find in
dribble, they have two dudes who can dribble. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of like, that's their Achilles weak. That's one of their Achilles weakness. But yeah, it's an Achilles heel for the team.
Yeah, I mean, when you to me, it's not that, like, and I'm also not saying that you don't have guys who can't score. I think that you have Jalen Williams. I think that you have Chet Holmgren. I think all these guys can get a bucket. I think in shorts, in a pinch, you can rely on somebody like Lou Dort to knock down a shot, or Isaiah Joe, things like that. My point is that when you get into a playoff series, and we always go back to this, I have no problem admitting OKC is going to be an incredible regular season team. They may win the West. They may be the best team in the West during the regular season. I don't even think it's entirely out of the question that they end up with a better record than Boston. I don't think that's likely, but would I be completely blown away if it happened? I would not. They play. I think that OKC is playing Boston light style of basketball.
Yes.
But with all that said, my point is that when you get into a playoff series, the ability to get an easy bucket against a team that's scheming against you is going to be limited for OKC. And to me, that's a major concern for them, because if you can reduce Shea's efficiency a little bit, and you can reduce Jalen Williams' efficiency a little bit more, and you can relegate Chet Holmgren to basically being a spot-up shooter from three, you can not just beat OKC, you can easily dispense of OKC.
Yep. All right, so we got two more teams that we're covering. First up, the Mavs. Riggs, what do we think about them?
Well, clear my throat. Honestly, man, I think that Luka played 0 preseason games. Going into their first game against San Antonio, there was only one thing that game could reveal to me. Maybe 1.5. But the chief thing that it was going to reveal to me was, what does Klay Thompson look like in Dallas? There was nothing else that I was going to learn from that game, because I did not expect Dallas to come out looking overly sharp and ready to go, given Luka's absence during the preseason. And especially when you talk about Luka Doncic, because he's not the hub. He's more like James Harden said, he is the system. And so I think seeing Klay Thompson through the first two games, Klay looks incredible.
He really does.
And I don't I mean, tell me, be honest with me, because maybe I've got a blind spot because I want them to do well. I don't think it's an understatement to use the word incredible.
No, he's been fantastic. And it just goes to show how bizarre this entire offseason's talk about Klay Thompson has been. As if there was some downside to adding potentially the greatest spot-up three-point shooter in NBA history to play next to Luka Doncic. And people were trying to galaxy brain themselves into saying that was somehow bad. It remains one of the most bizarre storylines. And it wasn't just one person. It was the entire media. No, it's worked as well as you would expect. He's knocking out open three-pointers. If Luka has so much confidence, he's turning around before. I
don't even know that Klay had caught the ball yet.
Caught the ball. No, not only that, he turns around. Klay takes a dribble as he's turning around.
And Luka points at the guy in the front row.
It's of course it's going to work, and it's I think this is going to be a partnership that you're going to see for years to come. And once again, we talked about this earlier. A lot of the problems with Klay Thompson could be easily solved by reducing his role and what he was asked to do. He was being asked to do too much for the player that he had become at the age 35. They have reduced that. They are not asking him to generate offense for themselves consistently. He's a spot-up shooter for them. He gets, he will probably average somewhere between 5 to 10 3-pointers a game and a couple of mid-range jump shots here and there, maybe a layup or two. But he's not number 2 option. They're not asking him to be number 2 option. He's fantastic. He is going to be a major, major asset. And amazingly, as no one else has ever predicted before, once you reduce the offensive burden, there's more energy for defense. So now he's a better defender than he was last year. Okay, surprise, surprise. This whole conversation.
Also, when you create a situation in which he wants to be a part of it and he feels welcomed and he's happy. Look, I don't know Klay Thompson. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm not going to crawl into his head. Based on the way that Klay has comported himself in interviews in the past, I think it is safe to say that Klay is very much a guy who's very authentic. He wears his feelings on his sleeve. And it seems very clear to me that he's the type of person who is going to excel in a situation in which he feels needed and wanted and is being properly utilized. And I think that you're going to see that manifest itself on the court. I mean, the thing I would say about my expectations of Klay going into both the San Antonio game, but also he played well in the Phoenix game. Yeah. He played really well in the Phoenix game. The problem for them in the Phoenix game,
hit a shot, but he was good.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the Phoenix game, there are a couple of things I'll say schematically, but outside of Luka, Kyrie wasn't fully Kyrie, but Kyrie was enough Kyrie to get the job done that night. Yep. Klay. And I really don't even want to put Lively on this list, and I'll explain why in a second. But Luka, Kyrie, and Klay were really good that night. Yeah. The issue was the only other guy on the court who was making shots, Derek Lively, wasn't taking shots.
That is a problem.
That's a problem. I think he was 2 of 2 in that game. That's an issue. Go back and look, because I remember, he kind of came out. They say first impressions are a big deal, or whatever the saying is. He came out in that San Antonio game, and he looked a little sluggish to start, and that impression stuck with me. And I remember telling you, I don't remember where we were, but halfway through the third quarter, maybe even into the fourth quarter, I was a little critical of Derek Lively, and then I went and looked at his numbers, and I was like, oh shit, he's actually having a phenomenal game. Yeah. And I just think that I think that when you look at PJ, Najee, Quentin Grimes, Hardy, just nobody else on the team in that Phoenix game was making a bucket. They're going to have to figure out how to get those guys in rhythm, which leads me to my schematic point. they're trying to do a lot of different stuff. And I think that Jason Kidd is and I'm not even questioning whether or not they should be trying to do a lot of different stuff. I think that I'm not questioning the coaching. I'm just making observations. I think that they're trying to do a lot of stuff that, where Luka's not initiating the offense. There's a lot of movement that's happening on the backside. Luka's coming off of a dribble handoff or something like that, and they're looking to, create some action that way, particularly for Klay, and get Klay in the rhythm of the game, get Klay feeling like he's built into the team and stuff like that. I think that's all super important. I think building Klay Thompson's confidence will pay dividends in the latter half of the season and into the playoffs. But I think that eventually you're going to have to start looking at ways to fold the Jaden Hardys, the Quentin Grimes, the PJ Washingtons, and all those guys back into the offense.
Really, because he seems like a fish out of water. Who? PJ. Yeah.
Well, and PJ looked great against San Antonio, and then he looked terrible. He looked terrible against Phoenix. The thing I'll say about that is a lot of what they're doing, sort of testing out, is very different than the way the Mavs offense has traditionally operated, with Luka being in a high pick and roll and then, driving to the basket, collapsing the defense, finding the open shooter, kicking it out to them. And I think that with a player of Luka's caliber, it's good to fold a lot of that other stuff into the offense. It's good for it to be there, particularly to get somebody like Klay Thompson involved in the game and to build his confidence. But I think as you move into the later, I guess it's hard to reinvent the wheel. And I think that wheel is a highly potent weapon that creates lob opportunities for Gafford and Lively, open corner threes for PJ Washington. I think it will work very well for Quentin Grimes. I think it will work very well for Najee Marshall, particularly Najee Marshall, because even when Najee Marshall isn't shooting the ball well, he's going to attack closeouts very well. I just think it's going to take some time for because those are three major contributors who are new to Dallas, and it's going to take some time for them to build all of that into the offense. I don't look for them to have any noteworthy struggles like where we're talking about them, being underwater, or is there concern in Dallas or anything like that. There's just way too much firepower on that team. And then, my last note that I'll make about Dallas before we kick it over to you and get your thoughts. At a certain point, like Daniel Gafford is a good player. He fits particularly well in Dallas. He's a hyper athletic big who's added some weight. He's an elite rim protector. I have nothing negative to say about Daniel Gafford. Derek Lively, when he is playing confidently, is demonstrably better, and has a much higher ceiling. Yes. I would like to see him imbued with the confidence that comes with starting minutes, and I would like to see him start to sort of work his way into that role and see what that means for Dallas. Because I think that's one of the things that's going to take Dallas to another level.
Yeah, the ultimate evolution of this Dallas team has Lively in the starting lineup. I think
that's unquestionable. Like, I think we're at a point where we're not saying if, but when. Yeah. And I think I'm arguing that when should potentially be a little sooner. Granted, Jason Kidd's around the team a little bit more than I am and has a greater sense of what a basketball team should do. But that's my sense from afar, is that the sooner the better.
No, and they've been hinting at it. In fact, it's actually kind of weird that Gafford started, because they've been saying all preseason that it was going to be Lively was going to take the job, and then it's sort of like you turned at the last second. But no, I think you covered pretty much all of it. This is a team that's incorporating a couple new pieces, like 3 or 4 major new pieces, rotation pieces. So take some time. Like it's going to have some bump. Like, even the San Antonio game, you saw it. They were really rough in the first half. They were really good in the second half. It's sort of like, it's choppy. I think the Phoenix game shows that they're right now a little dependent on the jump shot. Like they can get a really little bit jump shot happy. And I think they need to focus and be more concerned on driving to the hoop. just to open that up.
Especially against a defender like Jokic, who's so easily not Jokic, Nurkic, who's so easily to bait into fouls.
Yeah, and especially because there's no in Ryan Dunn, their rookie is not bad at shot blocking, but they don't have any shot blocking threats. Like KD's the only other one. He's not, he's not Wemby by any means. But I think this team's going to end up being just fine, and I think that people are just trying to figure out where their roles are. There's a lot evolving. There's young players are grabbing more responsibility. There are mainstays from last year who actually haven't been there that long. PJ Washington, for example.
Yeah.
Gafford, they have not been there that long. They're still trying to figure out where they're at. There's all the new additions. We haven't even talked about Grimes, Marshall, and all those guys. It's going to take 10, 15 games to gel before we start.
I agree. And if this team was being coached by Darvin Ham, I think that it would have already reached its peak, because I don't think you would have a highly sophisticated, long-term vision for what this team could be. Jason Kidd is far removed from that. He's a much more he's got a bigger basketball mind, to put it bluntly. And I think that he's much more thoughtful in what he's trying to create. And I also think he's not trying to create something for November. I think he's trying to create something for, spring, late spring, and into the summer months. And I think that that's going to take time, because what he's trying to build isn't going to be born tomorrow.
That's like some pro podcasting level professional segue to our next and final topic right there. So, and I think the best way to bring this up is, Riggs, have you remortgaged your house to bet on JJ Redick being coach of the year?
I didn't remortgage it. I just sold it and put all the cash directly onto DraftKings.
All right, yeah.
So look, man, this team has no notable additions to it other than Dalton Connect. And I want to underscore that I did call him notable, because I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. But I actually think that it's not quite as much of a no-brainer, because there were other elements involved with the hiring of JJ Redick. But I think it's on par with the Klay Thompson narrative that you were discussing earlier, where we're looking at a guy who's an all-time great, potentially the greatest to ever shoot the basketball, moving to a team with one of the greatest playmakers to ever play basketball on it, who's known for being able to upgrade the production of his teammates and create open looks for them, and then asking, can the greatest shooter of all time make an open shot? It's just a dumbass question. You know what I mean? When you look at the Lakers last year and the year before, and I'm an LSU fan, I live in Baton Rouge, and I was blessed and cursed with many years of Les Miles and Ed Orgeron coaching our teams. And their coaching philosophy can basically be boiled down to, we're going to put a ball down on the field and we're going to fight you for it. And I think that was Darvin Ham's philosophy in coaching basketball too. It was just tighten the screws, man. Go out there, play hard. Don't give them anything. And you just have to think that a bunch of professional grown men who've been playing basketball. I mean, LeBron James has been playing basketball longer than Wemby's been alive, right? Like, not just, hold on. He's been playing in the NBA longer than Wemby's been alive. Yeah. Like it's insane. And he had 32, 14, and 10 the other night. I believe he became the first player in NBA history to score 16 points, have 5 assists and 5 assists, 6 rebounds, or 6 rebounds and 5 assists, whatever it is, in a single quarter. He's insane. And Darvin Ham looks at him in a timeout and says, we just got to tighten the screws. Don't give them anything. As though LeBron James is sitting over there thinking to himself, we need to loosen the screws. Let's give them everything. So it's a no-brainer to me. we all know JJ Redick is a basketball player, but we also know him as a podcaster. And the thing that made his podcast unique was how analytical he was in approaching the game of basketball. It is a no-brainer to me that if you're going to take somebody with a basketball mind like that and apply it to players like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you're going to get more out of them. But beyond that, it was obvious to me that there was a player sitting in LA who had revealed himself to be an all-star level player who had never been allowed to play like an all-star level player. He had never been put in a situation to succeed. And that player is Austin Reeves. And I think Austin Reeves is revealing himself through the first 3 games of this year to be what I think most Laker fans and most casual observers of the Lakers who watch a lot of basketball already knew, which is that this is a guy who can create shots for himself, get to the foul line, create for others, and knock down clutch shots. And what JJ Redick said was, he's a really good basketball player. I'm going to create an offense that creates opportunities for him to succeed and puts him in positions to make our team better, rather than telling him to tighten the screws and just go out there and fight harder and don't give them anything. So it's not a surprise to me that the Lakers are better due specifically to coaching. I'm not surprised at all by that. Like, watching their offense, it's more organized, it's more intentional. It's working. Like, and this is really important, particularly for LeBron. It's not working as hard. It's creating. It's using misdirection and screens and things like that to create easy baskets, rather than LeBron James and Anthony Davis having to work their ass off, burn 300 calories per point. Like, it's insane. And so that upgrade is just obvious to me. And that upgrade has upgraded Austin Reeves. It's upgraded LeBron James. It's upgraded LeBron James in a way. I want to be very clear. I don't think JJ Redick has made LeBron James a better player. I think what JJ Redick has done, though, is made LeBron James a better asset for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think you saw it last night. If you're not relying on LeBron James for 40 minutes a game, night in and night out, and you're able to win games without milking him, then the nights when you need him, he can go out there and drop 16 in a row in the fourth quarter.
That last point I will agree with, yes. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I also think it's kind of common sense. Like, if that point is true, then a lot of this is going to depend upon running the offense through Anthony Davis, which also just always seemed like, yeah, I mean, there was always, like, it wasn't even a secret. Like, there was always talk of it. Everybody was always saying we're going to run the offense through Anthony Davis, and then just nobody ever did.
For the last 5 years. I mean, there's just no any ifs or buts about it. That's what they should have been doing for a while now.
100%. And people always said it. And I think, to be honest with you, I think Darvin Ham said it. I think that the problem is, and I think Darvin Ham believed it. I think it melds with Darvin Ham's mentality. I think that the problem is developing and executing a strategy that enables that to become a reality. That's where Darvin Ham failed. And I think JJ Redick is having a lot of success. And then I think a final point that there is one negative in all of this that I need to touch on, but one more positive note. Dalton Knecht. Dalton Knecht is what the Lakers have needed. They have needed an athletic wing who can move off ball, catch, shoot, drive to the basket, finish. And he also has shown little flashes of being able to help create for others. All of this he did at Tennessee at a really high level in college basketball. So it's not really altogether surprising that he's capable of it. He also demonstrated it in the preseason. So I'm not shocked by any of this. And the fact that he's basically a more athletic JJ Redick and JJ Redick's his coach, drawing this up, living vicariously through the budding career of Dalton Knecht shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, you know. And so I think that that's my initial reaction to now the collateral damage in all of this is when you think about what type of basketball JJ Redick likes. And if you don't know because you haven't listened to his podcast or you haven't watched him play, just go watch the Lakers. It's like his mind has vomited onto a basketball court, right? Like you see it. There is one player who, I mean, fits like a turd in a punch bowl and all of that, and that's D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell does not fit into any of this.
He's been kind of bad.
Yeah. I mean, D'Lo hit like last night, I think, is where you saw D'Lo and how he fits in to what JJ Redick is wanting to do. But it's not asking a lot of him, and it's hard. You know, I think if they keep winning, that may calm some of D'Lo's potential frustrations. And once again, I don't know D'Angelo Russell from a hole in the wall, so I don't want to sit here and talk like I've got, you know, a text chain going with him. He just strikes me as someone who, you know, if he feels like he's not highly involved in the offense, that he could grow frustrated with that. And, you know, maybe them continuing to win will help, you know, mute some of those frustrations. But I think that where you're going to see D'Lo's role in the JJ Redick Lakers is a catch and shoot guy. I mean, obviously, D'Lo's ball handling and passing ability is going to have him playing the role of playmaker from time to time. I just think that JJ Redick is such like an efficiency nut that D'Lo's decision making really he's allergic to it, and so I think there will be problems there. I'm done.
There you have it. I think Ben Riggs is the first person to ever predict that the same team will sweep Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year. I think you were the first person to ever predict that. And
if you were giving out the Defensive Player of the Year award right now, you give it to Chet. I'm not gonna. But I mean, it's a three.
We'll take away Defensive Player of the Year, but all the other ones you have.
And I think, like, you know, you expect Anthony Davis. He's always going to be an elite defensive presence. I don't know that you can expect, like, because quite honestly, the Defensive Player of the Year award last year, in my opinion, should have come down to Wemby and Anthony Davis.
100%.
Rudy Gobert's ass shouldn't have been anywhere near the discussion, in my opinion. And any voter who puts him anywhere near the discussion moving forward should immediately have their rights to vote on that award revoked instantaneously. And they should be publicly humiliated for their decision to vote for him to be Defensive Player of the Year. But I think it's unreasonable to expect Anthony Davis to maintain that level of defensive play with over an 82-game season with the amount you're asking from him on the offensive end.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. You know, I think that, I mean, you summed it up nicely. They're playing really well. They've come out really, really strong. They won. They beaten the, but you know, they beaten the Suns, the Phoenix team, the Suns, and and Sacramento. I don't know why the Suns was so hard for me to get there for a second, but
the Sacramento is the one that's more noteworthy.
Yeah, we were the Bogey team for a long time, and I think that they have shown more. They have more of an identity than I've seen in the 2 years under him. There's a clear identity. There's a clear purpose. You can clearly tell what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to do on the court, and that's huge. I'm going to wait a little longer before extolling the genius of JJ Redick, but he clearly has connected with them. I think a lot of that was that he is not Darvin Ham. I think Darvin Ham going to LeBron James and saying, we're going to try to find the best way to use you in year 20.
Might have pissed them off.
Might have pissed LeBron James off, a little bit. And the clips you see of, what's the one where he's like, LeBron's like, Give me the fucking clipboard in the huddle. Yeah,
Let me. So you say you're gonna take a little while longer before you extol the genius of JJ Redick. Let me take one more crack at Ben Staten. All right. I understand the tendency to want to wait a little longer. I've brought it up multiple times throughout the podcast. I've said, like, hey, I'm not willing to write Indiana off. It's only been 3 games, right? I'm not willing to say that, Boston just already has the championship under their belt. It's only been 3 games, right? I've said this multiple times. Like, Chet's been playing great, but hey, guys, it's been 3 games. Like, so it's fair that you would then look at me and be like, Ben, JJ's done a good job coaching the Lakers, and they've played well, but it's only been 3 games. Why are you being a hypocrite? Why are you suddenly, shelving this 3-game standard? Here's the reason. If I told you that the Lakers were going to open the season and Austin Reeves would play well, Anthony Davis would play well, and LeBron James would play well, I don't think that you would have any question marks about whether those 3 guys could play good basketball. The one person who I think there would have been a question mark on that has played really well for the Lakers in the starting rotation is Rui Hachimura.
Very fair. He's got him playing aggressive. He's got him playing very aggressive.
Rui Hachimura is stepping into the role that everyone envisioned for him when he came to the Lakers. Right? I think that what he has done is he has created a situation in which Rui Hachimura is getting easy baskets. He's knocking down open shots. He's getting an opportunity to attack the rim. He is letting LeBron James pick and choose his spots. What he's doing with LeBron is he's letting LeBron play Olympic point guard LeBron. And I very easily can see JJ Redick taking that job, LeBron going over to France to play in the Olympics, him watching LeBron run the point guard for the Olympic team, and then thinking to himself, I'll be damned. This is exactly what we're going to do in LA. And he's got LeBron sitting on ball, initiating the offense, not really exerting too much energy, letting him pick and choose his spots, which 39-year-old LeBron's very comfortable and good at doing. He's got an offense where Anthony Davis is the hub. He's creating opportunities for players like Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. And in doing so, he's building team chemistry and team morale and getting buy-in from everyone. And to me, like, that is sort of that's the fundamental building blocks. I'm not saying they're going to win the West. I'm not saying they're going to win a championship. I am saying that this is the type of team, and I said it before the season started, and I'll say it again. Let OKC play JJ Redick's Lakers in the first round of the playoffs.
That would be interesting. Now, if you've put out your wild extrapolations from 3 games, and I'll put out one that may be even more wild, because I know he played really well to close the game yesterday, but for me, there have been some warning signs that LeBron's athleticism is finally starting to go a little bit, and that we might be seeing some regression. Because if you look at the first 2 games, he really struggled to finish layups. And even in his great fourth quarter, a lot of those were jump shots. And I'm probably going to be completely wrong about this. I
was about to ask you if you wanted to have a friendly wager as to whether or not we're gonna have the LeBron regression year.
There's no betting on this. I don't feel nearly confident enough to do that. But I do think that is something that I'm going to keep an eye on a little bit. And I think part of it is natural with AD taking the reins of the team. There's just a little, he's just less prominent in there. But I did notice that it did not seem to me he was getting as much lift on some of his jumps as he's used to. And the contested layups were a little more contested in some moments. But
I'm gonna note my skepticism for this one. And as Exhibit A, I'm just going to the opening night game. Was it against Phoenix?
That was against Minnesota.
Minnesota. The opening night game against Minnesota. I'm going to remind you of the play where Austin Reeves dribbles left to the strong side of the court. LeBron James is in the corner. Austin Reeves picks his dribble up and fakes the pass to LeBron James. His defender, I think who is Julius Randle, overreacts to that. LeBron James back cuts him. And then you get the patent LeBron James tomahawk dunk down the baseline.
Yeah, I saw that. I know what you're talking about. And that's no. I'm not saying he can't jump anymore. Let's be very clear. I think that the two plays that also struck with me was he had a couple of sort of breakaway layups where he had a defender who contested them, and he missed both of them, which is unusual if you've ever watched LeBron's career. He's pretty good at those typically. And then again, the Phoenix one, he shot, he shot generally pretty well in that game. He had a couple of shots of layups. One of them, which didn't count because it was after a foul, which were just straight up spiked down by the Ryan Dunn kid from Phoenix, who, by the way, is pretty good.
He is.
Yeah. But no, I think the best, going back to JJ Redick, I think the best way for me to say it is I've seen some very good signs. I'm going to need at least like a 10-game sample size before I can say to say anything. But no, he has definitely outperformed my expectations. I kind of expected the beginning of the season to be a little bit of a mess, to be honest, because I wondered how he would do coaching his first few games. But instead, he's come out and he's had a very good game plan for all 3 games.
Yeah.
So like there's you can't hold anything against them. They've been fantastic. They've been one of the most impressive teams in the league.
I'll just note for all the LeBron fans that might be listening to this podcast that you do have one ally who still acknowledges that LeBron in year 22 at age 39, just a couple months shy of being 40, is averaging 23 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists on 51% shooting and 39% from 3. If we do have is it King of the Court podcast at gmail.com? We do have an email address. Just make sure, because I know it's confusing. It's Ben Riggs and Ben Staten. It was Ben Staten that
I said what I said.
Yeah.
But no. All right. Well, there's so much more we could go over, but I think that's a great place to end it.
Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Peace. Hey, we made it.